Hello, everyone. Welcome to the, first episode of the Gen Z Catholic podcast. Now, because this is the first episode, there's a couple things I want to say real quick before I get into today's episode. The first of which is I am very sorry that this is a audio only podcast for now. I want to get the visual side up and running as soon as possible. And I was actually going to have a really nice studio set up. I was talking about how I recorded the first episode on my community tab a while ago, and there were some technical difficulties and a couple things that I was just not satisfied at all with the first episode. It was on the 7 or 8 woes of the Pharisees, and overall I think it was a really good episode. I just had to redo it, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to really surprise people. I'm going to come in with a full studio, kind of just like a little area that I'd set up. It would have a desk and it'd be a really nice little area. I got a nice camera, and I was about to get a really good microphone. Right now, I'm actually borrowing this microphone from someone else because right now my brother is borrowing my microphone, so it's a whole thing. Anyways, my wife and I were trying to get a little place set up where I could have a desk and it'd be in a nice area, but then while we were in the process of buying stuff for the studio, getting it set up, some things started happening at my work. So I worked at a Catholic school. I won't say which one, and I was their music teacher. And one of my responsibilities was that I had to pick out the music and play either piano or organ. Those mostly piano because I'm really a trash organist for their school masses. And there was this whole situation. I'm not going to tell the whole story today because it would take forever, and maybe I'll do my my story on this, I guess, in a whole other show that'll be dedicated just to this. But basically, the short version is it got to the points through several factors, all boiling over at the same time, where the administration, the principal, actually directly was telling me there was like these jazz songs. Actually, one of them I'll say specifically is "Go Out, Go Out." If you look up that hymn, they were demanding that I play this at the school mass. I tried to compromise with them several times, and they just no compromises. You're playing this. This is a direct order. And so I walked in there the next day and I said, "Here's my letter of resignation, effective immediately." And so I intended to walk out that day, but then we had some negotiations back and forth on whether or not I would rescind the resignation. They tried to put someone else in charge of the music for the school mass, and it ended up falling through for several other reasons, which again I won't get into here today. But the short version of all of this, I know I started with a short version, but basically I no longer had my full-time job. So I'm still in the process of transitioning to a new job. It's actually going quite well, quite promising. So don't really have to worry on that front. I'm not trying to complain, or I'm not setting up a locals account for you guys to donate to or anything like that. I'm just saying I was going to have a really nice studio set up and everything, but because I am transitioning, because of that whole incident, I'm transitioning to a new job. It is not fiscally responsible for me to set that up right now. Maybe things will be different in a little bit of time. Maybe I can get something temporary worked out. It might not be as flashy of a studio as I was thinking, but I might be able to get a small little area set up. I don't know, though. I'm kind of evaluating things week by week right now. So the second thing I wanted to mention with this being my first podcast is I don't want to get too much into current events with this show. I think we have a lot of people in the church right now, and this is a good thing. I listen to a lot of these shows, but a lot of people who just talk about current events all the time, and I think that's mostly covered, honestly. It's like I think that I could be all right if I wanted to be angry person yells at the camera about Pope Francis number 25. I think I would do an all right job at it, but that's not really what I want to do. There's a lot of things I want to bring, mostly variety to the Catholic genre. That's why I'm trying to upload videos that are more comedic lately, such as with the 5 things I love about the Novus Ordo. And it's a little hard sometimes with traditional Catholic crowds to joke around a little bit, because if I could offer a charitable criticism to the traditional Catholics, it's a lot of us seem to not be able to take a joke. So I'm really trying to work on that, but I also want to have some intellectual stuff. I want to have some apologetic material out there for topics that aren't touched as much. That's why I'm working right now on a massive video essay, kind of mini documentary. I call it a documentary, but it's really more of a video essay on sedevacantism, and it's going to be like the biggest one to date in terms of like video format stuff. It's not going to be as thorough as like, John Salz's book, Robert Sisko co-wrote it with him, True or False Pope. But in terms of video format stuff, I think it's going to be the most extensive to date. And I really want my content to be more of that stuff, stuff that's not touched on, maybe some comedic stuff. I don't want to just do current events all the time, but let's be honest with ourselves. This synod is crazy. This is completely unprecedented. This is insane. And I feel a little bit obligated to speak on it a bit. So I wanted to start with a little bit of why I feel called to do this specifically, is because I've struggled with this a lot. Even before the synod opened 10 days ago, I was already getting very worried hearing about the talks around it. I remember there was some type of, oh gosh, I should have written this down. I don't remember what it's called. But basically each continent wrote a document and they sent it to Rome, and they basically said, here is what we would like to be discussed at the synod. And I actually dug up all of those that I could and read them. And I wasn't able to access all of them for, various reasons, but of the ones that I could access, every single one of them brought up women's ordination. Every single one of them. And in a specifically positive or neutral light. Either they would say, we think this would be great, we want this to happen, or they'd say, we want the matter to be explored. You're left to interpret that. So they all brought it up, and I was getting very worried. And I actually remember there's another, he's another Catholic personality online around my age, but we've actually, without saying who it is, we've actually become somewhat good friends. We text each other back and forth, and I was kind of texting him about this, and I was saying, like, it's hard to not get blackpilled about what's happening. If they actually just pull the trigger and go through with this, and they start ordaining women and blessing certain types of couples, you know what I'm referring to, I feel like I just short circuit. Like, of course the Catholic Church has to be the one true church, but how is this possible? They seem to be pushing this, what's going on? And we had a brief conversation about that. I thought it went pretty well, and I've started reflecting on it more and more and more in the last couple weeks. And there's a couple thoughts that I think need to be emphasized a little bit more. So I wanted to just throw them out there. And this podcast, of course, when we start wondering what the practical results are, like, okay, they ordain women to the priesthood, or they have women deacons. What's the practical result? Do we all just become sedes? Do we become sedevacantists? Do we just leave the church entirely and just become like Eastern Orthodox or Protestants or non-denoms? What happens next if they start doing that? Or do we just say we were wrong all along and women can be priests? What's the practical result? I want to say first and foremost that this podcast here is for Catholics who want to make sense of things and be faithful to the church, but they just can't make heads or tails of what's happening right now. So those of you who are like Eastern Orthodox or sedes or something, those objections can be dealt with in due time, but I'm trying to not address everything at once in this podcast. Believe me, I would love to bring sedevacantism into this and make it a 7-hour podcast and address every facet of that. I would love to do that, but unfortunately, this video essay I'm making, once that's released, that'll be my thoughts on that conversation. But for today, this is geared towards Catholics who want to make sense of things, but just can't. Because I was in that boat for a little bit there. I was just trying to make sense of things, and it really took a lot of reflection and a lot of prayer to really feel like I could be comfortable with the situation. So I wanted to also bring up that the people who say things are just business as usual with the synod, which I guess I should give a quick note, because I was actually, right before starting to record this, some people in a group chat that I'm in with various Catholics, they started saying, like, what's going on with the synod? What is this? And some people seem to not even know about the synod in the first place. So just in case anyone's clicked on this podcast and has no idea what I'm talking about, but is still here, The Synod on Synodality is a synod happening in Rome. It's basically a bunch of people gathered together to talk about various issues. We know that they're talking about women's ordination. We know they're talking about same-sex couple blessings. And they basically will, after they have their synod, they'll write up some type of document that'll be given to the Pope, and then the Pope will take that into consideration, and then he'll write his own decree, and that'll be I guess it'll be magisterial. I'm not really sure how magisterial documents work, or what the levels with these things are, but basically, yeah, the Pope will make a document after taking their document into consideration. So that's basically what's happening right now, in case anyone doesn't know. So the people who say this is business as usual, they're wrong. And these are definitely confusing times. I know a lot of people are trying to counteract the confusion and the chaos by saying, oh, you know what? Well, Pope Francis is the most orthodox pope we've ever had. He's perfectly fine. There's just a couple people trying to misrepresent him on purpose to make money, but it's business as usual. This is just a synod. There might be a couple crazy people in there, but it's fine. That's a lie. It's I guess I shouldn't try to read their interior intentions with saying these things. They might be erring in good faith, but the idea that Pope Francis is perfectly orthodox and it just wants this to be a normal synod, that's not true. And I might go so far as to say that this might be one of the most confusing times in church history. I am not a church historian. I'm not an expert in these matters, but I'm at least passingly familiar with the major crises that have happened in the church. And just kind of going through them in my mind, I have to look at this situation where the church just openly seems to be saying, we're going to start ordaining female priests and stuff like that. I got to imagine this is one of the most confusing times, if not the most confusing. I could be corrected on that. Possibly we've had more confusing times, but honestly, this really seems like a good contender for the most confusing. But an important thing to note from that is the fact that God has allowed you to live through this trial means he thinks you can make it through it if you keep your faith. So you should realize you're one of the I guess lucky ones, if you want to say that. God thinks that you can make it through this trial. He thinks things are confusing right now. They're probably going to get even more confusing, but he thinks you can make it through it. And the first thing to keep in mind, though, when we're thinking about what are the outcomes, okay, they have the synod, what's going to happen next, is that church teaching will not change. A lot of people are shocked at this idea. They're like, what are you talking about? Haven't you seen what's happening already? But I can say with 100% confidence, church teaching will not change. It can't change. It's impossible for it to change. I know that many of the people, probably almost all of them at the synod, wants to change church teaching. I know they have the intention of changing church teaching, and I think quite possibly even Pope Francis intends to change church teaching. I can't say that with complete confidence, but there are a lot of people attending the synod who seem to openly say we want to change it, but they can't. They can try, they'll fail. And a lot of people think I'm being naive when I say this, like, wake up and smell the coffee. Don't you see what's happening here? You can't just sit here and say, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Aren't you going to look stupid once everything changes afterwards? Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind, God is more powerful than these people. His church will prevail in spite of these people. It's not going to collapse because there was an entire generation of people who wanted to change church teaching, because that's not how the church works. It's either of purely natural origins, in which case it's an anomaly that the teachings were consistent for 2,000 years until they just so happen to change. That would be really, really, really weird, but not logically impossible. Or it's of divine origin, in which case, who cares what they intend? Church teaching will not change. So if you believe that the church is of divine origin, you must believe that church teachings won't change. And I get it. I know this sounds naive. I know people are thinking, yeah, church teaching won't change. But don't you see what's happening right here? But still, just keep in mind, the church was established by Jesus, and the church is eternal. It'll last until the end of time. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. And from these premises, we can definitively conclude that the church will not change its teachings. But I still will admit that they're going to try, and they're going to try really hard. It's not as if they're going to be possessed at the last second and they're going to write this super orthodox document, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Like, it's not going to be like that. And they're basically going to be I guess the analogy that I've been using lately is they're going to start playing a really close game of I'm not touching you with heresy. You know that game. I don't know if everyone's familiar with this or not. I was the youngest of 9, so I'm very familiar with it. But it's when a person basically, some sort of bully figure holds his finger up to someone really, really close and just, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. And they'll do that over and over and over again just to be obnoxious. And they're going to do that with heresy. They're going to get really, really close. They're going to get right up to the line and then just, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. And they're going to do this big time. We've seen this a lot. People accuse Vatican II of this with weaponized ambiguity. Personally, after reading many of the Vatican II documents myself, I think there are a couple sentences that are really ambiguous, but most of the council is perfectly clear if you read it in its entirety, or at least each individual document in its entirety. And I really don't see it there, but in some of the post-conciliar magisterial documents or decisions that have been made, we start to see a little bit of that I'm not touching you. And I think it's been getting worse and worse and worse in the past few decades, and leading up to the Synod, I think they're going to get unbelievably close while still saying I'm not touching you. And they might do this in creative and sneaky ways. They can't have female ordination because a woman can never become a priest. It just can't happen. They can't even become a deacon as the church currently understands deacons, but they might do a bunch of subtle maneuvers that make it look like they have female deacons now, even though they technically don't. I remember I was actually going to a mass right off of the campus where I attended college, and they basically one day had these female altar servers who were adult women, and they were like middle-aged, some of them like old, and they didn't have the traditional altar server garb. It was like one long white robe that they were wearing, and they just kind of pranced up onto the altar and started, assisting the priest in various things, that usually the altar boy would do. And it was really confusing. Me and my wife, and I think my best friend was also there, we just kind of shot all of each other a look like, what the heck is this? Should we get out of here? And we realized as the mass was going on, they're just, these women are just the altar boys. They just have them really dressed up. They look kind of like deacons. That's really confusing, but technically a woman is allowed to serve as an altar boy at masses. The church has allowed that. So technically they're not doing anything wrong, but it certainly looks confusing. I think they're going to maybe do something like that. They're either going to slightly change the definition of deacon or something and start using some equivocal sense of the word, meaning more like helper, getting back to the original Greek origin of the word, and then say, we now have a female deacon, but it doesn't actually involve the conferring of any actual holy orders on them, but instead they're basically going to be ordained, glorified altar boys. Maybe they'll do something like that. I don't know. Does that mean that they would have female deacons finally? Well, no, not in the sense that the church currently understands deacons. And this is purely speculation right here. I'm just spitballing. I'm just making up examples off the top of my head. The point that I'm illustrating is they might have a bunch of subtle maneuvers to make it look like they changed church teaching when actually they're just still playing their game of I'm not touching you. So another thing that I think I should point out is that we will also probably have, after the Synod concludes, there'll be a bunch of liberal bishops and liberal lay people and everyone celebrating, saying that they changed church teaching finally. But this has already happened before. There have been times in the church where the liberals will say that they changed teaching when they actually didn't. The same thing happened at Vatican II. Again, everyone who's going to say Vatican II was heretical and deviated from church teaching, I'll deal with that objection in due time, but for today, that's not really my focus. But there were a lot of people who said we finally did it. Vatican II changed church teaching. They started celebrating. They started doing goofy renditions of the mass. They did everything. They thought they actually changed church teaching, but that doesn't mean they did. And I think we're gonna have the same thing at the Synod, where they'll say, "Yay, we did it! We finally changed church teaching," but that doesn't mean they actually did it. And if the church can survive Vatican II, it can survive the Synod. I can say that with complete confidence. I've done a lot of research on Vatican II for the Sedevacantism video essay I'm making, and it was really bad. It was I don't think quite as bad as the Synod in some respects, but in other respects it was even worse than the Synod. And there was a lot of crazy things happening from day one. And I'm just remembering this quote off the top of my head now, but I believe it was Cardinal, who was it? Giuseppe Siri, who said something along the lines of, if the church were not of divine origin, then Vatican II would have buried it. And if the church can survive Vatican II, it can survive the Synod, period. And their game of I'm not touching you might get so advanced that we don't have the answers. We're not all legal experts in the church. We don't know fine distinctions and canon law and ecclesial proceedings and stuff, and we don't have to pretend that we're all canon law experts. They might do something that's confusing, or we don't understand what exactly it is, and they're going to celebrate as if they finally overturned church teaching. But we just have to remember, from the basic tenets of the faith, that's impossible. And it's okay for us to say, I don't understand what's happening right now, but I'm going to just stick with the traditional understanding. If they say, we now have female priests, we can just say, no, I don't think you do. I think Pope John Paul II definitively closed that matter, and I'm going to go ahead and, until the church at a later time can say how A and B connect, I know that A was definitively handed down to us, so I think I'm going to stick with that for the time being, because it might be that they've done some very, very subtle maneuver, and it might be 10 years down the road when they finally clarify something like, oh, this wasn't actually female deacons or whatever. I keep coming back to that specific issue. That's just kind of my placeholder for any confusing things that might come out of the Synod. But basically, we don't have to pretend that we're church legal experts. And we should always keep the faith. And if you're struggling with a lot of these things, or feel like if they did do something crazy, or I didn't know how to, or rather, I don't know how to explain some of these confusing things, then I think reviewing mere Catholicism is one of the things that would be most beneficial, and just review the reasons why the Catholic Church must be the true church. And a lot of time, because I remember a long time ago, I said, female deacons is where I draw the line. If ever I see a female deacon in a Catholic parish, I will become a sedevacantist right then and there. And or if the church produces any document saying we can now have female deacons, I would become a sedevacantist right then and there. But after working on this project, I have, I think, 5 or 6 really solid reasons where I can say sedevacantism absolutely is not a Catholic position. The sedevacantist church is not the church Jesus established. I think I can say that with incredibly good confidence. And again, I'm sorry, we'll just have to wait till the video essay comes out. I don't want this podcast to become 7 hours, but I can say with complete confidence that that's not the Church of Christ. And Eastern Orthodoxy has many of the same problems. Protestantism, there's a million reasons why that doesn't make any sense. And atheism, of course, makes no sense whatsoever. And none of the other monotheisms, Judaism or Islam, make much sense. It's like, by process of elimination, you have to arrive at the Catholic Church. And I'd love to get into every single one of those one at a time and just say why none of them make sense except for the Catholic Church. Maybe I'll do a video series at some point. This is an idea I'm coming up with right now, but yeah, maybe I'll have a video series. I take every major religion or every major Christian denomination and I just explain why that cannot be the truth. But for today, I think reviewing all those reasons would be very beneficial to say, okay, this might be confusing. They might do some sneaky game of I'm not touching you where it's so close that I can't even see the separation between their finger and heresy, so to speak. I guess if they're not touching heresy in this analogy, it gets a little confusing at that point. But if you can't see where the separation is, then just keep reviewing mere Catholicism and stay tunneled vision on the main tenets of the faith, because we're not all called to be these great legal scholars just to be saved. What do we need to be saved? We need the sacraments, and we need to stay focused on those at all times. So just to kind of summarize everything I've said so far, yes, these are very, very confusing times. Don't listen to anyone who says everything is business as usual. It's not the case. It's really not. And if you believe that everything is business as usual, then you'll probably just deflate if they do anything really confusing, because you'll think, oh, I thought everything was perfectly normal. Now they're saying that SS couples can now receive blessings, and it looks very close to marriage. I thought everything was business as usual. I guess not. Well, I'm leaving the church now. And I think a lot of people will be very disappointed if they're taken off guard if they're not prepared. So just remember, it's not business as usual. We need to keep our guard up a little bit, and always stay tunneled vision on the basics of the faith, because if you don't have that strong grounding to know that Catholicism is definitely the one true church, then any scandal or any really confusing thing that might take a little bit of time to sort out or have clarified is just going to seem like, this absolute detriment. So basically, there's no possible way the church could exist for 2,000 years until a single pope realizes that it was possible to destroy the faith all along. And let's just grant the Beneplanist position for a second, because I know a lot of people might just think, oh, Pope Bergoglio is an anti-pope, and Benedict was out in the Munis, blah, 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 blah. I know that's a whole thing. And let's just grant all of that and just assume for the sake of argument, yep, Pope Francis is an anti-pope, and this whole thing is invalid. Do you think that one single anti-pope can destroy the whole church? Seriously, can a single anti-pope destroy the church? That's how much power anti-popes have over God Almighty? No, of course not. God is more powerful than a pope or an anti-pope. I'm not saying Pope Francis is an anti-pope. I'm just saying let's for the sake of argument grant their premise and just proceed as if it's true. But I still don't think he can possibly change church teaching. And if he were an anti-pope, and I think people would have to realize that the practical implications of that would also be very confusing, because I don't think every single bishop, every single priest, every layperson will wake up the next day and then all in unison say, we declare the apostate Bergoglio to be a heretic. It's not going to happen. It's never that's never worked like that before. And how many bishops would you need to say the magic formula that's Pope Francis is an anti-pope before he does become one? Would 100 bishops all coming together to declare it mean that he's an anti-pope, or would that just be 100 schismatic bishops? What about 200? What about 50% of them? Okay, 50%. That's saying, oh, but what if it's only 49%? It's really confusing. I don't think it could ever happen. I don't think it is possible for an anti-pope to be recognized on that level to the point where 100% of the church, or at least including the Sedevacantists who don't recognize him if you say that they're in the church, and like the two bishops or so who've publicly denounced him. Besides those people, 99.9999% of the church recognize an anti-pope as a pope. I don't think it can ever happen. So I'm getting a little sidetracked, and I'm talking a little bit more about Beneplanism than I wanted to, but that's basically what I wanted to point out. The church will not go away. The teachings of the church will always be there, and they will not change, because God is more powerful than any of these people who want to change church teaching. They do want to change church teaching. They really, really do. But honestly, I feel like my only message to them is go ahead and try. See what happens. You won't succeed. So the church is more powerful than people who want to change her teachings. And even supposing Pope Francis is an anti-pope, the church is more powerful than an anti-pope. Who cares about an anti-pope? If he is an anti-pope, I'm not saying he is. If he is, then okay, whatever. He can go ahead and try to change church teaching. He'll fail. So that's the main message I wanted to leave you guys with. I want people to have a feeling of optimism at the end of all of this, and really realize that no matter what, the traditional Catholic life cannot be taken away, no matter what. I know that we're struggling a lot right now with traditional liturgies being taken away after Traditionis Custodes. You can watch the video that I have on my channel about my wedding being canceled because of it, and we had to do a Latin Novus Ordo. Although the amazing priest, Father Hollowell, he was willing to do Latin Novus Ordo for us. Really a great gesture on his end. He's a absolutely fantastic guy, and I really respect him and appreciate what he's done for me and my wife. But the a lot of the traditional masses in my area, I think two of them that were within driving distance of me just disappeared. There's still one that I haven't been going to for a while now because of various personal reasons, but I'm going to start going again. And it's become harder in my own life to attend traditional liturgies because of Traditionis Custodes. And that still does not take away the traditional Catholic life, though. Even if Pope Francis were to come out tomorrow with a document saying no more traditional masses whatsoever, Fraternity of St. Peter, you're all going to Novus Ordo overnight, no more diocesan Latin masses, nothing at all. Even if you were to do that, we would still have the traditional Catholic life. We could still read the Douay Rheims Bible. Learn Latin. Honestly, learn Latin. I'm doing it right now. I'm not very good at it. I try to incorporate some Latin into my videos just because I think we're Catholics and we should be able to, use some Latin as if it's just some inside thing with us. But yeah, learn Latin, read traditional saint writings. If you want a recommendation right now, The Secrets of the Rosary, I think it's called, by St. Louis de Montfort. Whatever his book on the Rosary is called, that's a fantastic book. I've read it. I plan on reading it again. Pray the Rosary every day. If you're looking to do 15 decades a day, one thing that I think helps is if you have a longer commute, as a lot of us do, than 5 decades on the way to work, 5 decades on the way back, and then 5 decades before you go to bed. That's a system I did for a while, and it works pretty well. Although with my job situation, I don't necessarily have that commute anymore. But you can still pray, read saint writings, learn Latin, read the Douay Rheims Bible, watch traditional religious movies such as the Ten Commandments. That's a fantastic one. There are some great Jesus movies, such as the word-for-word adaptation of the Gospel of John and the word-for-word Gospel of Matthew. Those are both really good movies. The Robe is another great one. Jesus of Nazareth, the miniseries, that's fantastic. And you can really incorporate all these things into your life. I like to I know this is terrible and people shouldn't do this, but I like to put on TV and then fall asleep to it. I don't know why. It just helps my mind relax. I used to lay in bed awake all night, but now that I've gotten used to just turning on a TV show, I'm asleep in 10 minutes every night. And I like to watch these traditional Catholic movies while, even though they're not necessarily Catholic, they're just religious movies, because when you have a movie, it's not as if it's made and produced 100% by Catholics, but these religious movies that are really beneficial to the traditional Catholic lifestyle, I like to watch those, as I fall asleep. I'll get a little snippet here and there before I'm asleep, and then my TV shuts off when it's over. But these are various suggestions on how you can bring the traditional Catholic life into every aspect of what you do. You can still pray the Rosary, read the Douay Rheims Bible. They can't take that away. No synod can take that away. The Pope can't take it away. I mean, he cannot issue a document saying the faithful cannot read the Douay Rheims Bible anymore. The faithful cannot watch the Ten Commandments. The faithful cannot pray the Rosary every day. He can't do that. And we all know he won't do that. He doesn't even want to do that in this case. So I can say with even more confidence than I can say the Synod won't change church teaching, I can say with even more confidence that the Pope will never do that because he doesn't even want to. So there won't even be a game of I'm not touching you with that one. So you can still live the traditional Catholic life at all times. And that's the message of optimism that I want to leave people with is, yes, things will get confusing. Yes, things will be hard. Yes, they'll play games of I'm not touching you. And it might be really hard to sort out what exactly is happening with all of it. But the church will always be the church. The church will always provide the sacraments, and that should be the center of our life as Catholics. Going to confession very frequently, receiving the Eucharist, going to adoration and just worshiping the Eucharist. And that will never be taken away. And the fact that you're living in such a confusing time means God knows you can make it through. So that's the message I want to leave you guys with. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I know that this is not super long for a podcast. It looks like we've only been going for about 35 minutes, but those were the main bullet points that I wanted to leave you guys with. In the future, I will have longer podcast episodes. The first take of the first podcast I did, The Woes of the Pharisees, that was about an hour. So I'll do another recording of that, and we'll see how that goes. And I have a lot of episodes planned for the future, especially ones where I'll have some sort of, I guess, co-host or just a guest on. I think my brother would be a really great guest to have on. We already have kicked around a couple ideas of what we could talk about. He's a super, super smart guy. So I want to bring him on for some stuff. And also some friends of mine I think would be really good to have on the show. And I don't want to do too much of these current events. And I don't know how I feel about solo shows yet. I personally like to listen to solo shows better. I know this is going to be a little bit insulting, but whenever I'm listening to someone like Taylor Marshall or Timothy Gordon, or even like Trent Horn, I prefer a lot when it's just them by themselves. And whenever there's a guest on, sometimes I won't even listen to the episode, honestly. I really, really like listening to solo shows, but it's a little bit harder for me. So that is one thing I'm legitimately curious about. If you're still listening this far, then let me know in the comments if you think it'd be better or worse to have guests on. So I'm going to kind of evaluate things as I go. Hopefully future episodes will be a little more focused towards mere Catholicism, living out the faith. But I thought it was important to make this episode. So let me know what you guys think. I definitely have a lot more coming. Hopefully we'll get the visual aspect up and running as soon as possible, because I really think that that'd be a better format. So let me know what you think. All comments are welcome, and I'm really excited to see where this podcast goes. So I'll see you guys all in the future. God bless.